Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Benjamin, and I have the privilege to be a part of the governance task force here at Asbury United Methodist Church. I'm here with a few other of our task force members, more about that later, to host a Zoom training on our governance task force update. It's a presentation to church stakeholders. It is one element of a variety of creative ways that we're trying to get the word out in our current environment around some of the changes that we're making to improve our governance and our ministry processes here at the church. If we can advance to the next slide, I'll go over the objectives. So the objectives of today are pretty simple. We have been, for the past little bit of time, and we'll talk a little bit about that, talking to different leadership groups, but we want to make sure that everyone in the congregation has an opportunity to understand the context and the elements of the proposal of the governance task force. We also want to set the stage to address questions and get feedback from the congregation as a whole, which will be part of a series of town halls that will be subsequent to this training. And most importantly, we are looking for your support and your mind sharing, your feedback in advance of a congregational vote that we will be looking at taking to adopt a new governance structure that meets the needs of Asbury First United Methodist. So that's what we're trying to do here today. The next slide talks a little bit more about, with everything that we have going on in society and in our community, why are we starting this congregational dialogue now? Well, we are discovering that it's actually more important to think through our governance structure and our ministry in this environment, as the pandemic has obviously made governance, not only at Asbury First, but everywhere in our society, even more challenging. We're continuing to hear from our staff that, you know, their workloads have changed, but they certainly hasn't gotten any easier. And we're called as leaders in the church to make sure that we're doing what we can to ease that burden. The other thing that we're needing to think through, and this training is a great example of it, is that, you know, remote worship and all of the things that remote worship means we need to think differently about collaboration. We've known that for a while, and it's never been more important than it is now. And then finally, you know, we are one church in the United Methodist Church, and that church is changing. We're not exactly sure what that means for us, but we know that we need to define and refine who we are to be able to meet the challenges of the moment or of the church as a whole. So that's why we're coming to you at this point. And then in terms of, you know, what we discovered, or why this led to some work that's been going on for a couple of years now, is an analysis of the current state. So I don't think that there's any argument about the fact that Asbury First United Methodist has been vibrant, has been growing, has been a vanguard of some of our staunchest principles. But when we talk about how we take our intent and put it into motion, we find that it's harder to, it's a little cumbersome, frankly, to get our thought or our intent into action. One of the things that I think anyone who has played a leadership or ministry role in this congregation understands is that to get anything done, you need to go to multiple groups for approval. There are many different committees, and sometimes people are attending many different meetings on the same topic. And then not only that, that slows down decision-making or stymies decision-making fully. And I think many of us have different examples of how that's happened over the past several years. But the content of the meeting itself doesn't necessarily focus on what we want to focus on, which is making sure that we are showing God's love in the community. A lot of it is on status reporting, it's on numbers review, it's less on strategy, and it's less on the actions that make a difference in people's lives. So that is how the governance task force was born. So now I'll turn over the discussion to Beth Rice, who will discuss how the task force was authorized.
Great, thank you. One of the future states that was outlined in our Dreamscape plan, which is aligned with our value of stewardship, is that our structure and systems are organized in a mutually effective way. So in order to make that dream come true and become a reality, the Church Council commissioned an initial task force in early 2018, who were to focus on establishing a more effective governance and ministry structure, and envisioning the breakdown between governance and ministry in such a way that we can streamline decision-making, align responsibility, authority, and accountability, and enable Asbury First to live into our mission and vision. Next slide, please. The work of the task force began with reading and discussing 2 books by thought leaders in the congregational governance and ministry field. The team then consulted with one of the authors, Dan Hotchkiss, and obtained his insights on how to take the next steps in the transformation process. In the contact with Dan, it enabled us to have a unique opportunity because we learned that Dan was scheduled to come to Rochester to conduct a workshop with another congregation, and Asbury First was invited to join in. We made an open invitation to the congregation, and as a result, 45 of our clergy, staff, and laypersons participated. We had a full workshop with the other congregation on a Saturday, and then on Sunday, Dan attended worship with us, and he spoke with just the Asbury participants for several hours in the afternoon. Next slide. So following the initial groundwork in 2019 and 2020, a proposed new governance structure was developed. The task force was expanded, and the current members are listed here. Val Benjamin and Don Reedy took on the co-chair role. The slide here lists the different work products of the task force, which you'll hear a little bit more about in the following slides. But the structure was affirmed by the church council and the trustees, and it was also spoken to at the church conference in January.
So this slide shows our current church council structure, and because there's a lot of text on the screen, I'll try to dig in here a little bit to help you understand. The yellow boxes show the 5 ministry areas, so outreach, congregational care, discipleship, worship and arts, and hospitality. And all the names in blue, or the roles in blue, are people that sit on the church council. You can see the church council in the blue box in the middle, including some at-large members. And on the left-hand side, there's the administration committees. So Stephen Cady is our senior minister, David Strong is our church administrator, the finance committee, trustees, staff, parish relations committee, and the nominations. And on the right-hand side, there's major events in task force. So, and you can see in the bottom of this slide, there are a few committees and committees and teams that are in red. And these are teams that actually fall under more than one area, which complicates the decision-making process. So for example, ushers fall under both worship and arts as well as hospitality. This is just a little bit of a closer view of those overlaps. So among the 96 ministries and governance efforts, there are several groups that fall under more than one ministry, and they create another level of complexity. If a group is not sure where they need to go with an idea for a new initiative or project, it becomes confusing and complicated. So in summary of our current structure, it's complex. There are many barriers to decision-making and confusion about the reporting structure. It's inefficient. Ministers and ministry area chairs spend a fair amount of time in meetings and hearing the same reports and updates more than once. It's cumbersome. It doesn't allow us to make decisions quickly or easily or focus on making progress towards our Dreamscape goals. And Chuck Hanrahan is going to move on with talking a little bit about the vision and principles.
So how are we going to change this? Studies have shown that a smaller governing board actually allows more participation and better decision-making. So we're proposing a smaller governing board focused on long-term vision, policy, and oversight rather than implementation or operations. We want to empower the senior minister to lead. We'll create a clear policy structure that specifies delegation, gives guidance, and provides accountability for decision-making. We envision a consultative, collegial, and inclusive leadership with responsibility, authority, and accountability clearly defined and transparent decision-making. We expect an environment of healthy conflict management and mutual support. And the congregation will be engaged as governors, as discerners, and as ministers as we work together to love God and neighbor, live fully, serve all, and repeat. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? In the new model, we're proposing to separate all of the current committees, groups, teams, task forces, etc., into two categories. The first, governance, led by the Asbury First Board, will focus on the business of the church with a small number of committees. These are things like finance, SPRC, investments, nominations, property stewardship, and other such things. Everything else, every ministry team, such as worship, outreach, youth, discipleship, congregational care, music, etc., will be led by the staff under the senior minister. The governing board provides policies which give guidance, define delegation, and create expectations of accountability. Both groups are driven by the mission, vision, and values of the congregation. The two groups come together in the annual planning process, led by both the board chair and the senior minister. To think about it another way, in more of a organizational chart manner, we have the governance board on the left, which has the committees I previously identified, and they're doing the strategic visioning, the policy development and oversight, and their responsibility includes delegation, guidance, and accountability. On the right side, you see all of the ministry teams that we have today, led by the staff, both lay and clergy. They come together in the annual planning process once a year, and this process is led by both the board chair and the senior minister. I'll turn it over to Stephen to wrap it up.
Sure. So we want to just say that part of what we mean when we say that the staff will be leading the ministry areas is not necessarily that every staff person will be in charge of the doing the actual ministry, but rather that within that area, the staff will be providing oversight. So it still may very well be that your particular ministry or outreach ministry will be led by a volunteer person, but that is always going to be able to have a clear oversight by a member of the staff, so to be able to point that way. So we have developed a board policy book that clarifies the role of the board and board officers and board committees and all the expectations, because obviously we want to make sure that the people who do this are invested in what it is that we're doing. So we want people who are on our board who are able to be there, are able to be prepared, so that we can keep the mission and vision in front of us and set policy that allows us to flourish as a congregation. We've also outlined within that board policy book our delegation to the staff, what exactly it looks like and how we're holding staff accountable. We're also put in there the guidance and limitations, so we know exactly what we are able to do and what we're not able to do, and then offers additional information about where the board provides oversight. Deb, if you don't mind advancing the slide, please. So we've got some other things that we need to do. Obviously, when we had been working on this and we're very prepared to come and begin the conversation in likely April, so that we could vote on it in May, and then in June and beginning July, we would be able to implement this. When the pandemic hit, we had to change. So we had already been to the various current committees and received affirmation from them, as Beth said earlier in this presentation. But now we're trying to figure out, okay, so how do we do this? This is one attempt to be able to present the materials that we would have presented in a town hall, but we recognize that people are going to have questions and we want to be able to answer those questions. So in a moment, we are going to put up a slide at the end that's going to show exactly when those days are for us to hold those town halls. So at the end of this presentation, stay tuned and you'll see the town hall material and when it is. Our hope is that you will have watched this presentation and read the information that we've provided. We have a one-page primer on our website. We have a quick interview up there as well. And we have the policy book for those who want to delve into the details of everything that we're speaking about. So In order to do that, then we'll have those town halls, and after which we were hoping to hold a congregational vote. Now we're going to have to do it via Zoom or via some mechanism, which we will share with you as we figure out what's going to be best. But our hope is on December 13th, we can vote to approve this plan so that when we begin in January, we'll live into this in a new way. And then in January, we'll be able to put the nominations forward for exactly who will sit on each of these boards and in this board and on these committees, and that we can begin to do more good together. We know that it's time, and we're ready to be able to shift a little bit so that we can meet the changing needs of where we are and continue to live out our mission and vision as a congregation. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to tune in with us, and please know that if you have questions, we are very happy to address them. If you go to asburyfirst.org/governance, you can learn a little bit more about what it is that we're sharing with you today. Thank you so much.